Over the next 2 hours, Tom helped me restructure my entire estate. I signed a new will, leaving everything in an irrevocable trust for Sophie, with Tom and Frank as trustees. The trust specified that Sophie couldn't access the principal until she turned 25, but the trustees could use the funds for her education, health care, and basic needs. Michael and Brittany were explicitly written out. The document stated clearly that they were to receive nothing, not one penny, not one item of personal property. I also signed power of attorney documents giving Frank and Tom control over my medical and financial decisions if I became incapacitated. The documents explicitly stated that Michael was not to have any decision-making authority regarding my care or my assets. "This is good, Dorothy," Tom said as we finished signing the last document, the notary's seal still fresh on the paper. "But there's something else you should know, something I need you to understand clearly. These documents will only protect you if you're alive to enforce them. If something happens to you and it's ruled an accident, Michael and Brittany could potentially contest the will. They could claim you weren't of sound mind when you changed it, that you were confused or being manipulated. It's unlikely they'd win, but they could tie things up in court for years. So what do? We need evidence of their intentions. Frank told me about the cameras. That's good. That's the right move. But we also need you to be very careful in the meantime. Don't put yourself in vulnerable positions. Don't accept food or drinks you haven't prepared yourself or watched being prepared. Don't let yourself be alone with them on stairs or near water or anywhere an accident could plausibly happen. Don't get in a car with them driving. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." I felt like I was in a movie, some thriller where the paranoid protagonist is running from shadows, seeing danger everywhere. Except this wasn't a movie. This was my life, my actual life. And the people I was afraid of weren't strangers or criminals from some faraway place. They were my own family, my son, the woman he'd chosen to marry, the people who should love me most in the world. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, Michael called. My heart sank the moment I saw his name on my phone screen. "Mom, we're doing Christmas Eve at our place this year. Brittany wants you to come help with the preparations. Can you be there around 10 a.m.? My throat went dry. This was it. This was the opportunity Frank and I had been waiting for. The chance to plant the cameras and find out if my fears were justified, or if I was just a paranoid old woman seeing threats where none existed. "Of course, sweetheart. I'd love to help. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself. And Mom, wear something nice. We're taking family photos this year." After we hung up, I immediately called Frank. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. "It's happening," I told him. "Christmas Eve. I need to plant the cameras. Okay, come up to my apartment tonight. We're going to practice until you can do it in your sleep." I spent that night and the next 3 evenings in Frank's apartment, practicing with the cameras over and over again. He'd set up a mock room with furniture similar to what was in Michael's house, and he made me practice finding the perfect hiding spots, activating the cameras, positioning them for the best angle. By the 4th night, I could do it with my eyes closed. "Remember," Frank coached me, "these cameras are motion activated and they record to a secure cloud server. That means even if they find the cameras and destroy them, we'll still have all the footage. The cameras will only record when someone's in the room, so we won't waste storage on empty rooms. And the battery life is about 6 weeks, so we have plenty of time. Are you sure they won't see them?" "I'm sure. These are professional-grade surveillance equipment. I used them on dozens of cases. As long as you position them correctly like we practiced, they'll be virtually invisible." Brittany and Michael aren't looking for cameras because they have no reason to think you'd plant them. People don't see what they're not expecting to see. Christmas Eve morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully, wearing the nice outfit I'd worn to Sophie's school recital last year. I put on Robert's pearl earrings again for courage. In my purse, carefully wrapped in tissue paper and hidden in a zippered pocket, were the 4 tiny cameras that might save my life, or prove that I was overreacting to nothing. I took the bus across town, my heart pounding the entire way. What if I got caught? What if Brittany saw me planting a camera? What would I say? How would I explain? But I had to know. I had to understand if I was really in danger, or if this was all in my head. Michael answered the door this time, not Brittany. He looked surprised to see me, checking his watch. "Mom, you're early, again." There was irritation in his voice. I'm sorry, I caught an earlier bus. I thought it would be helpful to give Brittany more time. Whatever. Come in. Brittany's upstairs getting ready. Make yourself useful in the kitchen. Everything you need is already out. He walked away before I could respond. Already back on his phone, already dismissing me. I stood in the entryway for a moment, gathering my courage. This was my son, the baby I'd held in my arms. The toddler who used to cry when I left the room because he wanted his mom. The little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them beautiful flowers. What had happened to that boy? Where had he gone? I went to the kitchen and started working, keeping my ears open, listening for sounds from upstairs. I could hear the shower running, hear muffled voices. They were both upstairs. This was my chance. Working quickly but carefully, just like I'd practiced, I planted the first camera in the decorative wreath hanging on the kitchen wall, tucking it between the pine boughs and berries, angling it so it had a clear view of the kitchen table, where I'd noticed Michael and Brittany seemed to have most of their serious conversations. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out, but my hands were steady, muscle memory from all that practice with Frank. Next I slipped into the living room on silent feet. There was a large potted plant in the corner, one of those decorative fake trees that never seem to grow or change or need watering. I nestled the second camera among its plastic leaves, positioning it carefully so it had a view of the main seating area. It took me 3 tries to get the angle right, and I nearly knocked the whole plant over in my nervousness, catching it at the last second. The office was trickier. Michael's home office was off the main hallway, and I had to be quick. I could still hear water running upstairs, but I didn't know how much longer that would last. I moved as fast as I dared, setting the camera into a pen holder on Michael's desk, hiding it among the other pens and pencils, adjusting it until it had a clear view of where Michael would sit at his desk, and where someone would stand in front of the desk. It took me 3 tries to get the angle right, and I nearly knocked over a framed photo of Michael and Brittany on their wedding day, the photo where they both looked so happy, so full of hope for their future together, before Brittany became cruel. Or maybe she'd always been cruel, and Michael had always been weak, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. The bedroom was last, and it was the one that terrified me most. If Brittany came out of the bathroom and caught me in her bedroom, there would be no reasonable explanation, no possible excuse. But I could still hear the shower running, could still hear Michael's voice downstairs on a phone call. I slipped up the stairs like a ghost, my stockinged feet silent on the plush carpet. Their bedroom door was open. I could hear the shower clearly now, hear Brittany humming something. Their bedroom was pristine, everything in its place. The bed made with military precision, hospital corners, and decorative pillows arranged just so. There was a photo on Brittany's nightstand, in an ornate silver frame, a picture of her and Michael on their wedding day, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. I picked up the frame with shaking hands, my fingers fumbling with the backing. I slipped it off, positioned the tiny camera among the frame components, where it would have a view of the nightstand and the area around the bed, and put it all back together. It took 90 seconds that felt like 90 years. Every sound from the bathroom made me freeze, certain I was about to be caught, certain this was all about to blow up in my face. But then it was done. The camera was in place. The frame looked exactly as it had before. I set it back on the nightstand, in the exact position it had been, using the dust outline as a guide. I was back in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with shaking hands, when Brittany came downstairs 15 minutes later. She was dressed impeccably as always, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. "You're slow," she said, looking at the vegetables I'd managed to prepare. "I told you I needed these done by now. We're already behind schedule because of you." "I'm sorry, I'll work faster." "You always say that, and yet you never actually work faster," she sighed dramatically. "I don't know why Michael insists on inviting you. You're more trouble than you're worth." I bit my tongue and kept chopping, kept my head down, kept playing the role of the submissive, helpless mother, who could be pushed around. Let her think I was weak, let her think I was helpless, let her think I had no idea what she and Michael were planning, because now I had cameras in place, now I would find out the truth. The rest of Christmas Eve passed in a blur of more cooking, more cleaning, more endless criticism from Brittany. Michael drifted through occasionally, always distracted, always on his phone or his laptop, always completely oblivious to how his wife treated his mother. Sophie helped when she could, shooting me sympathetic looks when her mother wasn't watching, slipping me small smiles that gave me strength. When I left that evening, cameras successfully planted, I felt like a spy coming in from the cold, an operative completing a dangerous mission. Frank was waiting for me in my apartment, having let himself in with the spare key I'd given him years ago. "It's done," I said, collapsing onto my couch with relief and exhaustion. "They're all in place, 4 cameras, exactly where we practiced." "Good. Great work, Dorothy. The cameras are already online. I can see the feeds on my laptop. You want to take a look?" He showed me his laptop screen, which was divided into 4 quadrants, each showing a different camera view. The kitchen, currently empty. The living room, currently empty. Michael's office, currently empty. The bedroom, currently empty. "They're motion activated," Frank explained, "so they'll only record when someone enters the room. Everything uploads automatically to a secure cloud server that only you and I can access. We can review the footage anytime." "How long do we watch before we know if I'm safe, or if I'm in danger?" Frank was quiet for a moment. "Give it a few weeks. Let them get comfortable. Let them have conversations when they think no one's listening. If they're really planning something, they'll talk about it eventually. And if they're not, if this was all just nasty talk with no real intent, then we'll know that too." For 6 weeks, I didn't watch a single video. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Part of me still hoped desperately that Thanksgiving conversation had been an aberration, that Brittany had just been venting, that there was nothing sinister happening, that my son still loved me somewhere deep inside, even if he had a terrible way of showing it. But then, on a cold Wednesday morning in early February, my phone rang. It was Sophie, and she was crying so hard I could barely understand her through the sobs. "Grandma, please," she gasped between sobs. "You have to be careful." I heard them talking again, Mom and Dad. "Last night, after they thought I was asleep. They're planning something bad. They keep talking about your medicine, and your stairs, and making it look natural." "Grandma, I'm scared. I'm so scared. I think they're really going to hurt you this time." My blood ran cold. "Sophie, sweetheart, where are you right now?" "I'm at school, in the bathroom. I skipped first period because I had to call you. I couldn't wait. Please, Grandma, don't go over there anymore. Don't eat anything they give you. Don't trust them, please." "Sophie, honey, listen to me. I need you to go to class. I need you to act normal. Can you do that?" "How can I act normal when they're planning to kill you?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "Because I have a plan. I've had a plan this whole time. I'm safe, sweetheart. I promise you I'm safe. But I need you to trust me, and act normal. Can you do that?" She sniffled. "What kind of plan?" "I can't tell you yet, but soon, very soon. Just trust me. And Sophie, if you hear anything else, anything specific at all, you call me immediately, day or night. I don't care what time it is." After I calmed Sophie down, and made her promise to go to class, to act normal, to be careful, I called Frank with shaking hands. "It's time," I said when he answered. "I need to watch those videos, all of them." Sophie just called. She heard them planning something. "They're moving forward with whatever they're going to do. I can't wait any longer. I'll be right there." 20 minutes later, Frank was at my door with his laptop. We sat side by side on my couch, and he pulled up the video folder. There were dozens of files, date-stamped and organized by camera location. "Where do you want to start?" Frank asked gently. "The kitchen. That's where they seem to talk the most." He clicked on the first kitchen video, date-stamped December 26th, the day after Christmas. The camera had caught Brittany and Michael sitting at the kitchen table late at night, both in their pajamas, laptops and notebooks spread out in front of them. Sophie was presumably asleep upstairs. Brittany was wearing reading glasses, looking for all the world like a businesswoman at a meeting, professional and organized. "Okay, let's go through this systematically," she was saying, her voice businesslike and efficient. "We need to establish a clear timeline. First, what assets does she actually have?" "I told you already," Michael said, scrolling through something on his laptop. "Not much. Teacher's pension, around $2,000 a month. Social Security, another $1,500. She has about $40,000 in savings split between 2 accounts. The apartment is a rental, so there's no property. That's it. She's basically broke." "What about life insurance?" "You said she has a policy." "She has an old policy from the teachers' union, $50,000 death benefit." I'm listed as the beneficiary. She took it out decades ago when Dad was still alive and just never changed it. That's it, 50,000. That barely covers a funeral these days. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I know it's not much, but Mom never had money. Dad died young, and they spent everything they had raising me. She didn't have anything left over for investments or savings, so she's essentially worthless from a financial standpoint. Brittany tapped her pen against her teeth, thinking, except she's also a bird. She'll probably live another 20 years, expecting us to include her in family events, expecting visits, expecting us to take care of her when she gets too old to live alone. 20 years of obligation, and guilt trips, and having to pretend we care. What are you suggesting? Michael asked, and his voice was quiet, uncertain. Brittany leaned forward, and the camera caught her face clearly. Her expression was cold, calculating, completely devoid of empathy. I'm suggesting we accelerate the timeline. Look, we're already drowning in debt. Your gambling losses alone are over $80,000. My credit cards are maxed out at $60,000. The second mortgage on this house is killing us. We're one bad month away from bankruptcy. But if your mother died, we'd get 50,000. It's not huge, but it would give us breathing room. More importantly, we'd be free of her. No more obligation. No more guilt. No more having to invite her to holidays and pretend we want her here. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This was worse than the Thanksgiving conversation. This was detailed, calculated. They were sitting there discussing my death like it was a business transaction, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person who loved them. How? Michael asked quietly, after a long pause. Just one word, but it told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't refusing. He wasn't defending me. He was asking how to murder his own mother. Brittany smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. I'm a nurse, remember? I have access to medications. I understand how bodies work. I know what a natural death looks like versus suspicious circumstances. We could make it look like she had a heart attack or a stroke. Older people have them all the time. No one would question it. What about an autopsy? Don't they do autopsies when someone dies unexpectedly? Not usually. Unless there's reason to suspect foul play, they usually don't do a full autopsy on a 70-year-old woman with no history of good health care. They just assume natural causes. Old age. But just to be absolutely safe, we need to be smart about this. We need to establish a pattern first, create a narrative. What kind of pattern? Brittany pulled out a notebook and I could see she'd already written things down, already made actual plans. We need to make it look like she's been declining for a while. Getting forgetful, confused, having some small health scares. I can forge some medical records documenting various incidents, missed appointments, medication mix-ups, confusion about dates. Then when she dies, it'll seem like she'd been in poor health for months. Natural, expected, sad but not suspicious. Michael was nodding along like she was explaining a home renovation project, not the murder of his own mother. When would we start this pattern? Soon, next month maybe. But we need to be patient. We can't rush this. We'll start with small things. Getting her confused about dates and appointments, making her think she's forgetting things. Maybe she falls down our stairs during a visit. Nothing serious, just a small fall that we document and fuss over. Then we escalate gradually. Maybe she starts taking the wrong medications, gets the dosages confused. We document everything, build a comprehensive narrative of a woman losing her grip on reality, losing her health. Then when the time is right, when we've established enough of a paper trail, we finish it. Finish it, Michael repeated softly. You mean kill her? I mean let nature take its course with a little assistance. Brittany corrected, as if the semantics made it better. Look, Michael, I know she's your mother. I understand that's complicated, but she's also standing between us and financial stability, between us and the life we deserve. Think about what we could do without her. We wouldn't have to pretend anymore. We wouldn't have to invite her to holidays or feel guilty when we don't visit. We'd have 50,000 to pay down some debt. We could sell her furniture and belongings for probably another few thousand. We're essentially looking at solving multiple problems with one solution. My mother is not a problem to be solved, Michael said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. Yes, she is, Brittany insisted. She's absolutely a problem. She's a financial burden, an emotional burden, a social burden. Every time we have to include her in something, I'm embarrassed. Did you see what she was wearing at Christmas? That ancient sweater? Those old lady shoes? Your colleagues and their wives judge us for having such a pathetic mother-in-law. It reflects badly on us, on our status, on our image. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, the words that broke my heart completely. How do we start? Frank paused the video. We sat in silence, both of us staring at the frozen image of my son and his wife, heads bent together over their notebooks, planning my death. There's more, Frank said gently. Hours more. Do you want to keep going? I wiped my eyes. I hadn't even realized I was crying. Yes, I need to see all of it. We watched 5 more videos that night. In one, Brittany explained in detail how she planned to forge medical records documenting my supposed declining mental health. How she'd create a fake patient history that would make my death seem inevitable. In another, they discussed different scenarios for staging accidents at their house. A fall down the stairs, a slip in the bathroom, a medication overdose that could look accidental. In a third video, Michael researched on his laptop how long it would take for someone to be declared legally incompetent, so they could potentially take control of my finances, even before I died. But the worst video was from just 3 days ago. The one that must have been what Sophie overheard. The camera in their bedroom had caught them getting ready for bed, having a conversation that was casual, almost domestic, except for the horrifying content. I saw Mom today, Michael said, taking off his watch and setting it on his nightstand. She looked so old, so fragile. Walking was hard for her. I almost felt bad about what we're planning. Don't, Brittany said firmly, brushing her hair at her vanity. She's had 70 years. That's more than a lot of people get. We're just helping her exit gracefully before she becomes even more of a burden, before she ends up in a nursing home, confused and miserable, not even knowing who she is. When do we actually do it? When do we move from planning to action? Soon. Her birthday is next month, March 15th. We'll invite her over for a small family celebration. Make it special. Make sure Sophie's out of the house. We'll send her to that school trip she's been wanting to go on. Then the accident happens. Maybe she falls down our stairs. Maybe she has a reaction to medication. We call 911. We're devastated. We're the grieving family doing everything we can. By the time the ambulance arrives, it'll be too late. They'll never suspect. Why would they? We're her loving family. And then we're free. And then we're free, Brittany agreed. They kissed, and I watched my son kiss his wife, after confirming plans to murder me, after agreeing to a specific date, after moving from fantasy to concrete action plans. When the video ended, I turned to Frank. My face was wet with tears, but my voice was steady. What do we do now? Now we go to the police, Frank said immediately, his cop instincts kicking in. This is conspiracy to commit murder. This is fraud. This is attempted elder abuse. We have more than enough to arrest them both right now. Will they actually go to jail, or will they get some expensive lawyer who convinces a jury that it was just talk, just dark humor, just venting about stress, that they never actually planned to go through with it? Frank was quiet, and I could see in his face that he knew I was right. Without an actual attempt on my life, without concrete action beyond their planning and their forged documents, a good defense attorney might be able to create reasonable doubt. They could claim the videos were taken out of context, that it was all just fantasy, that they were venting about financial stress but never actually intended to hurt anyone. What are you thinking, Dorothy? I'm thinking, I said slowly, the plan forming in my mind even as I spoke, that they've set a trap for me. March 15th, my birthday. They're going to invite me over and try to kill me, and I'm going to let them think their plan is working. But really, I'm going to set a trap for them. I'm going to let them incriminate themselves so thoroughly that no lawyer in the world can explain it away. Over the next week, Frank, Tom, and I planned every detail carefully. We'd let Brittany and Michael proceed with their plan, let them think everything was going according to their schedule. We'd document everything, but we'd make sure I was never actually in real danger. Frank would be nearby at all times. We'd notify the police ahead of time, but they'd hang back, wait for Michael and Brittany to actually attempt something criminal, something undeniable. We need to catch them in the act, I said during one of our planning sessions, in Frank's apartment. We need it to be so clear, so obvious, so undeniable, that no jury in the world would have doubt. This is risky, Tom warned, his lawyer instincts making him cautious. If something goes wrong, if they move faster than we anticipate, if Frank can't get to you in time. I know the risks, I interrupted, but I also know that if we arrest them now based only on the videos, they might walk, they might convince a jury it was all just, and then I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if they're going to try again, wondering when the next accident is coming. Frank nodded slowly. Dorothy's right, we need them to take concrete action. We need attempted murder, not just conspiracy. That's a charge that sticks, that's hard to defend against. 2 weeks later, right on schedule, Michael called. His voice was warm, almost tender, and if I hadn't seen those videos, I might have been fooled into thinking he actually cared. Mom, we're having a small party for your birthday next month. Just family, nothing big. Can you come over on March 15th, around noon? We want to make it special for you, my birthday, just like they'd planned on that video. Of course, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice happy, excited, completely unaware. I'd love to. That sounds wonderful. Great, it'll be nice, Mom. Just the four of us. Quiet, intimate, a real family celebration. Just the four of us, which meant Sophie wouldn't be there. They'd make sure of that. I'm looking forward to it, Michael. Thank you for thinking of me. I love you, Mom, he said, and the lie was so smooth, so practiced, that if I hadn't known better I might have believed it. I love you too, honey. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. That was my son, the baby I'd brought home from the hospital, wrapped in a blue blanket, so tiny and perfect. The toddler who used to climb into my lap for stories. The little boy who'd cried when he scraped his knee and only mommy could make it better. The teenager who'd hugged me tight on his first day of high school and whispered that he was scared. The young man who'd asked me to help him pick out an engagement ring for Brittany because he wanted everything to be perfect. Where had that boy gone? When had he been replaced by this stranger, who could look me in the eye and lie about loving me while planning my murder? The weeks leading up to my birthday were the longest of my life. Every day felt like a month. Every phone call from Michael made my heart race. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that video of them casually discussing the best way to kill me. But I also used the time to prepare. Tom updated my will one final time, adding even more specific language, that Michael and Brittany were to be completely disinherited, that any attempt to contest the will would result in additional penalty. Frank coordinated with the police, bringing in a detective he trusted completely, a woman named Maria Santos, who had worked with him for years, and who agreed that we needed to catch Michael and Brittany and we'll have units nearby, Detective Santos assured me in a meeting at Frank's apartment. We'll have the house under surveillance. The moment they make a move against you, the moment there's an actual attempt on your life, we move in. But Mrs. Sullivan, I need you to understand the risk here. You'll be in that house with two people who want you dead. If something goes wrong, if they move faster than we anticipate, you could be seriously hurt or killed before we can intervene. I understand, but I also understand that if we don't do this, if we arrest them based only on the videos, they might beat the charges, and then I'm in danger for the rest of my life. My birthday arrived on a Saturday. The weather was cold but clear. I woke up at 5 a.m., even though I didn't need to be at Michael's until noon. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. I thought about Robert, and how much I missed him, how much I needed his strength right now. I thought about Michael as a baby, as a child, as a young man, and I mourned the son I'd lost somewhere along the way. I thought about Sophie and how much I loved her, how determined I was to protect her from her parents' toxic influence. At 9 a.m., Frank came down to my apartment. He helped me get ready, checking the small panic button he'd given me, the one I wore on a chain around my neck that would alert him and the police if I pressed it. "You don't have to do this," he said one last time. "We can call it off right now. We can just arrest them based on what we have." "No," I said firmly. "We do this my way. We catch them in the act. We make sure they go to prison for a long time." I arrived at Michael and Brittany's house at noon exactly, taking a taxi instead of the bus because Frank and Tom insisted on it, said they wanted to control as many variables as possible. The house looked beautiful in the spring sunshine, the kind of house that should be full of love and laughter, not lies and murder plots. Brittany answered the door with a huge smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was dressed beautifully as always, and for a moment I wondered if she'd picked out that outfit specifically for my murder, if she'd planned what she'd wear when she called 911, crying crocodile tears about her poor mother-in-law's tragic accident. "Dorothy, happy birthday. Come in, come in." The house was decorated with balloons and streamers. A banner reading "Happy 71st Birthday" hung in the living room. There was even a cake on the dining room table, chocolate with white frosting, the kind I'd always said was my favorite. It all looked so perfect, so loving. The perfect scene for a family celebration, which made what was about to happen even more monstrous. Except Sophie wasn't there. "Where's Sophie?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Oh, she had that school trip to Washington, D.C. this weekend," Brittany said smoothly, the lie rolling off her tongue effortlessly. "She was so disappointed to miss your birthday. But we told her we'd celebrate with her when she gets back. You know how important these educational trips are." Which meant Sophie was safely away, wouldn't be a witness to whatever they had planned, wouldn't be traumatized by seeing her grandmother die. Michael emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray with 3 glasses of what looked like sweet tea. "Mom, happy birthday. I made your favorite." He handed me a glass. The tea looked perfect, the right color, the right amount of ice. But I knew from the videos that Brittany had planned to drug my food or drink. They'd discussed using crushed sleeping pills, enough to make me dizzy and confused, enough to make a fall seem plausible. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, taking the glass but not drinking. "Not yet. You're so thoughtful." We sat in the living room, making stilted small talk. Brittany kept insisting I drink my tea, her eyes watching me carefully every time I brought the glass to my lips, but then set it down without drinking. "You must be thirsty after your taxi ride," she said, her voice tight with false concern. "The traffic must have been terrible. Drink up." "I'm fine. I had coffee this morning." "Too much liquid, you know how it is at my age." I forced a laugh. Brittany's smile got tighter. She and Michael exchanged a look, a quick glance that might have seemed like nothing if I hadn't known what I knew. This wasn't going according to their plan. I was supposed to drink the drug tea, supposed to get drowsy and confused, supposed to make their job easy. Lunch was even more tense. Brittany had made pot roast, and it smelled delicious. But I knew from the videos that she'd ground up sleeping pills and mixed them into the gravy, enough sedatives to knock me unconscious within 20 minutes. I ate the meat and vegetables but avoided the gravy, using the excuse that my doctor had told me to watch my sodium. "But the gravy is the best part," Brittany insisted, her voice getting sharper. "I spent hours on that gravy. It's insulting to refuse it." "I'm sorry, but doctor's orders. Frank made me promise. He's been worried about my blood pressure." "Frank," Michael said, and there was something ugly in his voice. "Your neighbor, why is he so involved in your medical care?" "He's a good friend. He checks on me every day, makes sure I'm okay, takes me to doctor's appointment." I said it deliberately, planting the seed that I wasn't alone, that someone was watching out for me, that my death wouldn't go unnoticed or unquestioned. Michael and Brittany exchanged another look, this one longer, more worried. This wasn't in their plan either. They'd thought I was isolated, alone, with no one who cared enough to ask questions if something happened to me. After lunch, Brittany suggested we go upstairs. "I want to show you the redecorating I've done in the guest room. I'd love your opinion on the colors I chose." The guest at the top of a steep flight of stairs, the perfect place for an accident. "Actually, I'm feeling a bit tired," I said, setting down my fork. "These old legs don't handle stairs as well as they used to. Could I just rest here on the couch for a while?" "But I really want you to see it," Brittany pressed, her voice getting harder. We did it specifically with you in mind. We thought you might want to stay here sometimes. Have a space that's yours. Michael can help you up the stairs. Mom, come on, Michael added, standing and offering his hand. It'll just take a minute. We went to a lot of trouble for this. This was it. This was the moment they'd planned. They'd help me up the stairs. I'd be dizzy from the drugged food I hadn't eaten, and then somehow I'd fall. A tragic accident. An elderly woman losing her balance. So sad. So unfortunate, and they'd be $50,000 richer, free of their burden. I stood up slowly, making a show of being unsteady. My hand went to the chain around my neck, fingering the panic button hidden there. Frank was listening. The police were nearby. All I had to do was get through the next few minutes. You know what? I said, my voice shaking just a little. I think I should go home. I'm really not feeling well. My head is spinning. You can't go, Brittany said, and her voice was sharp now, the pretense of kindness dropping away. We haven't had cake yet. We haven't sung happy birthday. You can't just leave. I'm sorry. I just need to lie down in my own bed. I moved toward the door, but Michael stepped in front of me, blocking my path. His face had changed. The fake warmth was gone. This was a stranger wearing my son's face. You're not leaving, Mom. Michael, let me pass. No. His voice was flat, cold. You're going to go upstairs with us. You're going to see the guest room. And then we're going to have cake. Get out of my way, I said quietly, my hand tightening on the panic button. Or what? You'll call someone? You're a weak old woman. You have no power here. No one's coming to help you. You're wrong about that, I said, and pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Michael and Brittany just stared at me, confused. Then we heard it. Sirens in the distance, getting closer, getting louder. Michael's face went white. What did you do? I protected myself, I said, because I knew. I've known for months. I saw everything. The sirens were right outside now. Brittany ran to the window, her face a mask of shock and horror. The police are here, Michael. The police are surrounding the house. Someone was pounding on the door. Police, open up. We have a warrant. What did you do? Michael whispered again, but louder now, desperate. What did you do to us? I did what I had to do to stay alive, I said. Because you were going to kill me. You planned it. You prepared for it. You drugged and you were going to push me down the stairs. The pounding continued. This is the police. Open this door now or we're coming in. Michael moved toward the door like a robot, his face blank with shock. When he opened it, 4 police officers rushed in with guns drawn, followed by Frank, Tom Grant, and Detective Maria Santos. Michael Sullivan and Brittany Sullivan, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and elder abuse, Detective Santos said, pulling out handcuffs. What? No. This is a mistake. We didn't do anything, Brittany shrieked, her perfect composure shattering. We were just having a birthday party. We were just being nice to her. We have video evidence of you planning to murder Mrs. Sullivan over a period of months, Detective Santos said calmly. We have recordings of you discussing how to drug her, how to stage an accident, how to falsify medical records, and we have evidence that you attempted to carry out that plan today. That's impossible, Michael said weakly. The hidden cameras your mother installed in your house captured everything, Frank said, stepping forward. Every conversation, every plan, every cold-blooded discussion about how to kill her for insurance money. What cameras? Brittany demanded. There are no cameras in this house. We would have seen them. Professional surveillance equipment, virtually invisible, Frank explained. The kind police use in undercover operations. Your mother planted them on Christmas Eve. They've been recording ever since. And the drugged food. Detective Santos held up an evidence bag containing the gravy boat. We tested this while you were distracted earlier. Enough sedatives to render a person unconscious for hours. Add in the sleeping pills ground into the tea, and you were trying to pump her full of enough drugs to drop an elephant, more than enough to make your planned accident look plausible. The color drained from Brittany's face. We weren't, it was just, you can't prove. We can prove everything, Tom Grant said quietly. We have months of video. We have the drugged food. We have Sullivan's testimony about how you blocked her from leaving, how you tried to force her upstairs. We have forged medical documents in your handwriting, Brittany. Fake patient records documenting a declining mental state. We have everything. Michael turned to me, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be. The scared child, looking to his mother for comfort. Mom, please, please, I'm your son. You can't do this to me. You stopped being my son when you decided to murder me, I said, and my voice was steady, even though my heart was breaking into a million pieces. I gave you everything. I raised you alone after your father died. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. I sacrificed my own happiness, my own dreams, to give you every opportunity. I loved you with every fiber of my being. And you repaid me by planning to push me down the stairs and watch me die. We weren't really going to do it, Brittany tried desperately. It was just talk, just fantasy, just a way to blow off steam about financial stress. The sleeping pills and the food say otherwise, Detective Santos said. The forged medical records say otherwise. The fact that you blocked Mrs. Sullivan from leaving and tried to force her upstairs says otherwise. This wasn't fantasy, this was attempted murder. They were reading them their rights now, cuffing their hands behind their backs. Brittany was crying, mascara running down her face in black streaks, her perfect facade finally cracking. Michael just looked broken, empty, like someone had unplugged him from the world. Mom, he said one last time, as they led him toward the door, his voice cracking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. Don't, I said, cutting him off. Don't apologize. Don't make excuses. You made your choices. Now you live with the consequences. You're going to let them take your own son to prison? Brittany spat, her grief turning to rage. What kind of mother are you? The kind who refuses to be murdered, I said calmly. The kind who values her own life enough to fight for it. As they were led out in handcuffs, I heard Brittany screaming at Michael in the police car. I told you we should have done it sooner. I told you she was getting suspicious. This is your fault for being too weak to act. Even now, even caught, even facing prison, they were turning on each other. After they were taken away, I collapsed onto the couch. Frank sat beside me, putting a comforting hand on my shoulder. Tom stood nearby, ready to handle whatever came next. You did it, Frank said gently. You caught them. You stopped them. Then why does it feel so terrible? I asked, and the tears finally came, tears I'd been holding back for months. That's my son, my baby, and I just sent him to prison. He tried to kill you, Tom reminded me quietly. You had no choice. I know, I sobbed. I know, but he's still my son. Somewhere inside that man is the little boy I raised. The boy who brought me flowers and told me I was the best mom in the world. And I just destroyed his life. No, Frank said firmly. He destroyed his own life. You just refused to let him destroy yours too. We sat there for a long time in that silent house, the birthday decorations still hanging mockingly on the walls, the untouched cake still sitting on the dining room table. A celebration that would never happen, a family that had just imploded. Finally, I pulled myself together. What happens now? Now they're arraigned, Tom explained. The prosecutor has the videos, the physical evidence of the drugged food, your testimony. This is about as open and shut as cases get. They'll both be offered plea deals, probably 15 to 20 years if they plead guilty. Or they can go to trial and risk getting more. What about Sophie? She's only 16. Where will she go? Sophie can choose who she wants to live with, Tom said. She's old enough that the court will take her wishes into account. Does Brittany have relatives who could take her? Her parents, her sister. But I trailed off. They were all people who had treated me with contempt, who had laughed at me, who had looked down on me. I want Sophie to live with me, I said suddenly. The decision forming as I spoke. If she'll have me. My apartment is small, but we can make it work. She needs someone who actually loves her, who'll put her first. She needs stability and safety, and someone who won't use her as a pawn. That's very generous of you, Dorothy, Tom said carefully. Given that you just sent her parents to prison, Sophie is innocent in all this. She tried to warn me, tried to protect me. She was the only one who seemed to care if I lived or died. I wiped my eye. Besides, I've always wanted her closer. Maybe some good can come from this nightmare after all. The trial didn't happen for 7 months. During that time, Sophie did come to live with me. Brittany's parents tried to fight for custody, but Sophie made it very clear she wanted to be with me. At 16, the judge took her wishes seriously. It wasn't easy. Sophie was traumatized by everything that had happened, by the knowledge that her parents had been planning to murder her grandmother, by the realization that the people who were supposed to love her most were capable of something so monstrous. She had nightmares. She wouldn't eat for the first few days, paranoid about poison. She flinched every time someone walked behind her on the stairs, terrified of being pushed. But slowly, with therapy and time and patience, she began to heal. And so did I. We healed together, two broken people learning to trust again, learning to be a family in the ruins of the old one. The trial itself was devastating to watch. The prosecutor played the videos for the jury, and I watched 12 strangers' faces as they listened to my son and daughter-in-law casually discuss my murder over their kitchen table like they were planning a vacation. I saw shock, disgust, horror, pity for me. Michael and Brittany's lawyers tried every trick in the book. They claimed the videos were taken illegally and should be inadmissible. The judge ruled against them. I had every right to install cameras in my son's house when I had reasonable fear for my safety. They claimed it was all just venting, that their clients never really intended to go through with it. The drugged food destroyed that argument. They claimed the food was a mistake, that Brittany had accidentally grabbed the wrong container. The jury didn't believe them. How could they? The evidence was overwhelming. The videos showed clear premeditation, clear intent, clear planning over weeks and months. The forged medical records showed they'd moved beyond planning to concrete preparation. The drugged food showed they'd moved from preparation to action. My testimony about their behavior that day, blocking me from leaving, trying to force me upstairs, sealed their fate. The prosecution presented Sophie as a witness too. She testified about overhearing her parents' plans, about her desperate calls to warn me, about living in fear that she'd wake up one day to find her grandmother dead. Her testimony was heartbreaking, and I saw several jurors wipe away tears. It took the jury only 4 hours to reach a verdict: guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud for the forged medical records. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s, who had heard all the evidence, read all the documents, watched all the videos. Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Sullivan, she said, her voice hard and cold, I have presided over criminal cases for 23 years. I have seen terrible crimes. I have seen people do unconscionable things to strangers, but what you did is somehow worse. You targeted a vulnerable elderly woman, your own mother and mother-in-law. You exploited her love and trust. You planned her death with cold calculation over months. You forged documents. You drugged her food. You tried to block her escape. You did all of this not for survival, not out of passion or rage, but for $50,000 and the convenience of not having to invite her to holidays anymore. The judge paused, looking at them with obvious contempt. Mr. Sullivan, your mother worked 2 jobs to put you through college. She raised you alone after your father died. She gave you every opportunity, every advantage she could provide, and you decided she'd lived long enough, that you were entitled to whatever small inheritance she might leave behind. Mrs. Sullivan, you're a trained nurse. You took an oath to do no harm. Instead, you used your medical knowledge to plan the murder of an innocent woman whose only crime was existing. You forged medical documents. You drugged her food. You prepared to let her die and call it an accident. The judge looked at them for a long moment. You deserve no leniency. You deserve no mercy. The court sentences you each to 18 years in prison to be served in separate facilities. You will be eligible for parole after serving 12 years. In addition, you are both permanently banned from contact with the victim. Dorothy Sullivan, and with your daughter Sophie Sullivan, unless the court grants explicit permission. Sophie will be placed in the permanent custody of her grandmother. Michael cried as they led him away in chains. Brittany screamed at me that I was a vindictive old witch who had ruined their lives, that I'd set them up, that I was the villain in this story. Guards had to physically restrain her and drag her from the courtroom. Sophie didn't attend the trial. I didn't want her to hear those things, to see her parents at their worst, to be traumatized further, but I told her everything afterward, sitting in our small apartment, holding her hand. I'm sorry, I told her. I'm sorry you lost your parents this way. They weren't really my parents, Sophie said quietly, her voice older than her 16 years. Not the way parents should be. They were always so focused on money, on status, on what other people thought. I don't think they ever really loved me, not the way you do. I love you more than anything in this world, I said fiercely, pulling her close. You're not just my granddaughter anymore. You're my daughter. We're family. Real family. She hugged me tight. We cried together for everything we'd lost and everything we'd found. That was 3 years ago. Sophie is 19 now, a sophomore in college studying social work. She wants to help other families in crisis, other elderly people facing abuse, other children trapped in toxic homes. She wants to turn her trauma into something that helps others. I'm so proud of her. I could burn. As for me, I'm 73 now. I sold my small apartment and bought a modest 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town, big enough for both Sophie and me, with a small yard where I finally have a garden again. Frank lives just a few blocks away and comes over for dinner twice a week. He and Sophie have developed their own relationship, and I think he's become the grandfather figure she needed. Tom Grant helped me set up a foundation called Dorothy's Voice to help other elderly people who are being financially exploited or abused by their family. We provide legal services, help with protective orders, assist with estate planning, and offer support groups. I speak at senior centers and community groups about the warning signs of elder abuse, about how to protect yourself, about how to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. I've become something of an advocate, appearing on local news programs, writing op-eds for the newspaper, testifying before the state legislature on bills to strengthen elder abuse laws. My story has been featured in documentaries and articles. People write to me from all over the country, sharing their own stories of family betrayal, asking for advice, thanking me for speaking out. I never expected to become a public figure at 70 years old, but if my nightmare can help protect even one elderly person from what I went through, then maybe it was worth it. People often ask me if I regret what I did, if I regret installing those cameras, regret pressing charges, regret sending my own son to prison for 18 years. The answer is complicated. I regret that it came to that. I regret that my son became someone capable of planning my murder. I regret that I didn't see the signs earlier, didn't intervene when Michael first started changing, didn't recognize how Brittany was poisoning him against me. I regret that Sophie had to grow up knowing her parents tried to kill her grandmother. But I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret refusing to be a victim. I don't regret choosing life over the comfort of denial. I don't regret exposing the truth, even when the truth was ugly and painful, and destroyed what was left of my family. Michael writes me sometimes from prison, long letters full of apologies and excuses, and justification. He claims Brittany manipulated him, controlled him, convinced him to do things he never would have done on his own. He says he was weak, that he let his gambling addiction and his debt cloud his judgment, that he never really would have gone through with it. He begs me to visit, to forgive, to help him appeal his sentence, to write letters to the parole board on his behalf. I haven't responded to a single letter. Maybe that makes me cruel. Maybe that makes me unforgiving. Maybe a good mother would show mercy, would offer forgiveness, would try to salvage some kind of relationship. But every time I think about responding, I remember sitting in my apartment watching those videos. I remember watching my son discuss the best way to kill me, like he was discussing what to have for dinner. I remember the casual cruelty in his voice when he asked, "How do we start?" I remember him blocking me from leaving his house, trying to force me up those stairs to my death. And I remember something Frank told me during all of this. Dorothy, you can love someone and still refuse to let them destroy you. You can mourn who they used to be, while protecting yourself from who they've become. Those two things can coexist. So I love the memory of the son I raised. I love the little boy who brought me dandelions and called them the most beautiful flowers in the world. I love the teenager who came to me with his problems, who trusted me to help him navigate the complications of growing up. I love the young man who asked for my blessing when he wanted to propose to Brittany, but I refused to have a relationship with the man who tried to murder me. I refused to make excuses for him, to minimize what he did, to pretend it was somehow less serious than it was. Those are two different people, and I'm allowed to mourn one while protecting myself from the other. Brittany has never written, she's never apologized. From what I hear through Tom Grant, who occasionally gets updates from the prison system, she still maintains that I set them up, that I entrapped them, that I'm the villain who destroyed their lives for no reason. Her family stopped speaking to me after the trial, which is fine. I never liked them anyway. But Sophie and we've built something beautiful from the ashes of our broken family. We have Friday movie nights, we cook dinner together, trying new recipes, laughing when things go wrong. We talk about everything. Her classes, her internship at a domestic violence shelter, her boyfriend Marcus, who Frank thoroughly vetted and approved of, her dreams of getting her master's degree in social work. She calls me mom now, not grandma. The first time she did it about 6 months after coming to live with me, I burst into tears. Is that okay? She'd asked, worried she'd upset me. Can I call you mom? It's more than okay, I'd said, holding her tight. It's perfect. You're my daughter. You've been my daughter from the moment you came to live with me. Last week was my 73rd birthday. Sophie threw me a party. Nothing fancy, just cake and ice cream with Frank and Tom, and some friends from my work with the foundation. There were no hidden motives, no secret plans, no one wishing I'd have an accident, just love, simple, honest, uncomplicated love. As I blew out my candles, Sophie hugged me from behind and whispered, "Make a wish, Mom." But I didn't need to wish for anything. I already had everything I needed. I had my life. I had my freedom. I had my daughter. I had my peace. I had my purpose. Sometimes people ask me what made me strong enough to do what I did, what made me brave enough to install those cameras, to gather evidence, to press charges, to testify, to see it through to the bitter end, even when it meant destroying what was left of my family. The answer is simple. I realized that survival isn't selfish, self-preservation isn't cruelty, and refusing to be a victim isn't revenge, it's justice. I installed hidden cameras in my son's house because my daughter-in-law treated me like garbage. What I found on those cameras was that they weren't just rude, they were planning my murder. And I'm still here to tell the story, still here to warn others, still here to fight for the vulnerable and the elderly, and the ones who think they have no power against their abusers. I'm still here, and that's my victory. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If this story touched your heart, you can support me with a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your support. I'm looking forward to your comments. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect. I installed hidden cameras in my son's house because my daughter-in-law treated me like garbage. What I saw on those recordings made me realize they weren't just rude, they were planning my murder. If this story shocks you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this truth travels. Your support means everything. My name is Dorothy Sullivan. I'm 70 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will make you question whether you really know the people you call family. It started 6 months ago on a cold Tuesday morning in November. I was sitting in my small apartment, the one I'd moved into 3 years after my husband Robert passed away. The apartment wasn't much, just a 1-bedroom in a quiet building on the east side of town. But it was mine, paid for, safe, or so I thought. That morning I was looking at old photographs of Robert. It was what I did on bad days, when loneliness felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. There was one photo I kept coming back to, taken on our 30th anniversary. Robert had surprised me with a weekend trip to the coast, something we could barely afford, but that he insisted we needed. In the photo, we're standing on a beach at sunset, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. We looked so happy, so complete. I miss you, I whispered to the photograph, like I did every morning. I miss you so much it hurts. Robert and I had been married for 43 years. When he died, 43 years of building a life together, of raising our son, of being partners in every sense of the word. When the doctor told us it was cancer, stage 4, too late to treat, Robert had taken my hand and said, "We've had a good run, Dot. The best, don't you think? The very best." I'd agreed, even as my heart was shattering. He'd lasted 6 months after the diagnosis, 6 months of watching him fade, of holding his hand through the pain, of memorizing every line of his face, because I knew our time was running out. On his last day, lucid for the first time in a week, he'd squeezed my hand and whispered, "Take care of Michael, he's going to need you." "I will," I'd promised. "I'll always be there for him." But somewhere along the way that promise had become complicated. Michael had married Brittany a year after Robert's death, and from the very beginning, I could tell she didn't like me. At first I'd tried to win her over. I'd babysat Sophie when she was born, helped with the housework, brought meals when Brittany was too tired to cook, but nothing was ever good enough. Every gesture was met with criticism or indifference. And slowly, month by month, year by year, Michael had pulled away from me too. The son who used to call me every Sunday became the son who called once a month. The son who used to drop by for coffee became the son who only visited on major holidays. The son who used to hug me tight and tell me he loved me became the son who gave me awkward side hugs and mumbled obligatory love you twos. I'd told myself it was natural. He was building his own life. He was busy with work and his family, but deep down, I knew the truth. Brittany was pushing me out, and Michael was letting her. My phone rang, startling me out of my memories. It was Michael. He called maybe once a month, usually when he needed something, but I always answered with hope in my heart that this time would be different. This time he'd call just to say hello, just to ask how I was doing, just to tell me he loved me. "Mom, we're having Thanksgiving at our place this year," he said without preamble. No hello, no how are you, just straight to business. "Brittany wants you to come early to help with the cooking. Can you be here by 9 a.m. on Thursday?" Brittany, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had looked at me with barely concealed contempt since the day she married my son, 12 years ago, the woman who had systematically pushed me out of my son's life, piece by piece, year by year, until I'd become nothing more than an obligation he fulfilled a few times a year. "Of course," I said, keeping my voice cheerful despite the sinking feeling in my stomach. "I'd love to help. Should I bring anything?" "I could make my pumpkin pie, the one Robert always loved." "Just yourself," Michael said quickly. Too quickly. "Brittany has everything under control. Just show up and do what she tells you." Do what she tells you, like I was a servant, like I was hired help instead of his mother, the woman who had raised him alone, after his father died, when he was just 16, the woman who had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, because I refused to let him take on student loan debt, the woman who had sat up with him, through every nightmare, every illness, every teenage crisis. But I swallowed my pride and my hurt and said, "I'll be there." After we hung up, I sat holding the phone, staring at Robert's picture again. "He's forgotten us," I told the photograph. "He's forgotten everything we taught him about family and loyalty and respect. I don't know what happened to our son." Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood. I dressed carefully in my best sweater, the blue one Robert had always said brought out my eyes, even though he'd been gone for 7 years, and there was no one left who cared what color my eyes were. I put on the small pearl earrings he'd given me for our 20th anniversary, real pearls he'd saved up for months to buy. Touching them made me feel closer to him, like he was still with me somehow. I took the bus across town to Michael and Brittany's house, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in one of the nicer suburbs, the kind of house Robert and I had always dreamed of, but never could afford on our teacher salaries. The neighborhood was perfect, manicured lawns, expensive cars in every driveway, the kind of place that screamed success and money. As I walked up the front path, I thought about the tiny house where Robert and I had raised Michael. It had been small and cramped, with creaky floors and a leaky roof we could never quite afford to fix properly. But it had been full of love. The walls had been covered with Michael's artwork from school. The refrigerator had been plastered with his report cards and award certificate. Every surface had held some memory of our life together. Did Michael ever think about that house? Did he ever remember the nights we'd all squeezed onto our worn couch to watch movies together, sharing one bowl of popcorn because that was all we could afford? Did he remember the birthday parties I'd thrown for him, homemade cakes and games in the backyard, nothing fancy but made with so much love? Brittany answered the door. She was perfectly made up as always, her blonde hair in a sleek ponytail, wearing an expensive-looking cashmere sweater and designer jeans that probably cost more than my entire month's rent. She looked me up and down with those cold green eyes and didn't even try to hide her disappointment at what she saw. "You're early," she said flatly. It was 9:02 a.m. "I'm sorry, I caught an earlier bus. I thought it would be better to be early than late. Whatever. Come in. Take your shoes off. I just had the floors waxed and I don't want them ruined." She turned and walked away before I'd even stepped inside, leaving me to close the door behind myself. I took off my worn winter boots, suddenly conscious of how old they looked, how the leather was cracked and the laces were frayed. Everything I owned seemed shabby compared to the polished perfection of Brittany's life. I padded in my stockinged feet through the house, noting every expensive detail: fresh flowers in crystal vases, original artwork on the walls, furniture that looked like it came from designer showrooms. It was beautiful, everything perfect and coordinated like something out of a magazine. But it was also cold. There were no family photos except one professional portrait of Michael, Brittany, and Sophie looking perfect and posed. There were no child's drawings on the refrigerator, no Sophie's school projects displayed, no evidence that a real family lived here. Nothing like the warm, cluttered home where I'd raised Michael, where every surface held some memory, some piece of our life together. In the kitchen, Brittany was already barking orders, like a drill sergeant commanding troops. "The potatoes are in that bag. Peel them, all of them, and try not to make a mess. I don't want potato peels all over my clean counter. Use the garbage disposal for scraps, not the trash can, and wash your hands first thoroughly." "Of course," I said quietly, rolling up my sleeves and washing my hands under her watchful eye. For the next 6 hours, I peeled and chopped and stirred and cleaned while Brittany supervised with the air of a general inspecting troops. Every single thing I did, she corrected. The potatoes weren't peeled thin enough. I was wasting too much of the potato. I was stirring the gravy wrong. It needed to be clockwise, not counterclockwise, though I couldn't imagine how that mattered. I'd put the silverware on the wrong side of the plates. The napkins weren't folded correctly. The water glasses had on and on and on. A constant stream of criticism that wore me down like water on stone. At one point I accidentally dropped a spoon and it clattered on the floor. Brittany actually gasped like I'd committed a crime. "Be careful, that's Tiffany sterling silver. Do you have any idea how much that costs?" "I'm sorry," I said, picking it up quickly. "I'll wash it. You'll sterilize it," she corrected. "Boiling water for at least 3 minutes." I did as I was told, feeling like a scolded child. This was what every interaction with Brittany felt like. A series of small humiliations, designed to remind me that I was unwelcome, that I didn't belong in her perfect world. Michael appeared occasionally throughout the day, always on his phone, always distracted, always walking through the kitchen without really seeing me. When I tried to talk to him, ask him about his work or his life, he'd give one-word answers and drift away again like I was bothering him. The only time he seemed truly present was when Brittany spoke to him, and then he'd snap to attention like a soldier called by his commanding officer, eager to please her, ready to do whatever she asked. Where was my son? The boy who used to tell me everything, who used to come to me with his problems and his dreams. When had he become this stranger who couldn't even make eye contact with his own mother? The only bright spot in the entire miserable day was my granddaughter. She was 16 now, tall and beautiful with her father's dark hair, and what I hoped was my gentle nature, my ability to see the good in people. She came down from her room around noon, probably drawn by the smell of cooking, and her face lit up when she saw me standing at the sink, She rushed over and hugged me tightly, and I felt tears prick my eyes, because it had been so long since anyone had hugged me like I mattered, like I was loved, like my presence brought joy instead of obligation. "Hello, sweetheart," I whispered into her hair, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, holding her close for just a moment, before Brittany's inevitable interruption. "Sophie, stop bothering your grandmother. She has work to do," Brittany snapped from across the kitchen. "I'm not bothering her, Mom. I'm helping her." Sophie grabbed a knife and started chopping celery beside me, her movements quick and practiced. "Grandma, you want to hear about my history project? I'm doing it on women's suffrage, and I found the coolest primary sources." "That's wonderful, honey," I said, genuinely interested. Sophie was brilliant, always had been, with a quick mind and a passion for learning that reminded me of myself at that age. For a few precious minutes, we worked in companionable silence, and I felt less alone. But then Brittany sent Sophie to set the table in the formal dining room, and I was alone again with my daughter-in-law's cold disapproval radiating across the kitchen like a physical force. "You're too soft with her," Brittany said once Sophie was out of earshot. "She needs discipline, structure, not all this emotional coddling you do." "I'm her grandmother. Grandmothers are supposed to be soft, and look where that got you with Michael, a son who can barely stand to be around you." The words hit like a slap. I had to grip the counter to steady myself. "What? Oh, come on, Dorothy. You must know, Michael only invites you to these things because he feels guilt. He told me just last week that visiting you feels like a chore, like something he has to check off his list. He's outgrown you. He's built a life that doesn't include clinging to his mother's apron strings." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to say that wasn't true. But the cruel part was, I could believe it. Michael's distance, his distraction, his obvious discomfort whenever I tried to have a real conversation with him. It all pointed to a son who had indeed outgrown me, or at least wanted to believe he had. "Now finish those potatoes," Brittany continued, "and try to work faster. We're already behind schedule because you're so slow." I was 70 years old. My hands weren't as quick as they used to be. My back ached from standing so long. My feet hurt in my thin stockings on the hard tile floor. But I kept working, kept chopping and peeling and stirring, because what else could I do? This was the only connection I had left to my son. These awkward holiday gatherings, where I was tolerated but not wanted, useful but not valued. Dinner itself was even worse than the preparation. Brittany had invited her parents and her sister's family, so there were 12 people crowded around the enormous dining room table. I'd been placed at the far end, away from Michael, almost like I was an afterthought, someone who didn't quite belong at the adult table. Every time I tried to join the conversation, to contribute something to the discussion, Brittany would talk over me, or change the subject abruptly. Every time I offered to pass something, she'd tell someone else to do it instead, like my hands were contaminated, like anything I touched would be tainted. Brittany's family largely ignored me. Her father was a surgeon. Her mother was on the board of 3 charities. Her sister was a lawyer. They talked about their vacation homes, their investments, their connections. I had nothing to contribute to those conversations. I was just a retired teacher living on a pension, wearing a 7-year-old sweater, eating food I'd helped prepare but wasn't really welcome to enjoy. But the worst moment, the moment that changed everything, came during dessert. Brittany's mother was going on and on about their upcoming cruise, some luxury trip to the Caribbean that cost more than I lived on in 6 months. She was describing the ship, the excursions, the 5-star dining, the private cabana they'd booked. Without thinking, I mentioned that Robert and I had always wanted to take a cruise, but had never been able to afford it. "We talked about it every anniversary," I said softly, lost in the memory. Robert would get out travel brochures, and we'd look at all the different cruise lines, all the different destinations. We'd plan this imaginary trip we'd take someday, but someday never came. Brittany actually laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the dinner conversation like a knife. "Well, Dorothy, maybe if you'd worked harder instead of being just a teacher, you could have afforded nice things. Maybe if you'd had some ambition, some drive, you could have given Michael a better life instead of raising him in that tiny house with hand-me-down clothes and bargain store toys." The table went silent. Even Brittany's family members, who had been happily ignoring me all evening, looked uncomfortable. Several people shifted in their seats. Someone cleared their throat awkwardly. But Michael, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised and sacrificed everything for, sat there and said nothing. He just stared at his dessert plate, his face blank, his silence, a betrayal worse than any words. Teaching is important work, I said quietly, my hands shaking as I set down my fork, my appetite gone. I was proud to be a teacher. I helped shape young minds. I made a difference in children's lives, and I gave Michael everything I had. Of course you were proud, Brittany said with a condescending smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. Everyone needs to feel proud of something, even if it's not particularly impressive. Even if it means their son had to grow up poor because his mother chose a career with no real earning potential. The words hung in the air like poison. I could feel my face burning with shame and anger. I wanted to defend myself, to point out that I'd raised Michael alone after Robert died, that I'd worked 2 jobs for years to pay for his college, that I'd given up my own dreams and desires to make sure he had every opportunity I could provide. I wanted to tell her that love and sacrifice were worth more than money, that the time I'd spent with my son, the values I'd taught him, the foundation I'd given him, those things mattered more than designer clothes or expensive vacations. But I couldn't get the words out. My throat was too tight, my eyes too full of tears. I refused to let fall in front of her. I excused myself to use the bathroom, because I could feel the tears coming, and I absolutely refused to give Brittany the satisfaction of seeing me cry, of knowing she'd broken me. I locked myself in the powder room and sat on the closed toilet lid, taking deep breaths, counting to 10 over and over, telling myself I could get through this. Just a few more hours and I could go home to my small apartment where no one made me feel worthless, where no one reminded me of every way I'd failed. But as I sat there trying to compose myself, I heard voices in the hallway outside, Brittany and her sister, talking in low tones they probably thought I couldn't hear through the bathroom door. I don't know why you even invite her, Brittany's sister Lauren said with obvious disdain. She's so pathetic. Did you see what she was wearing? That sweater looks like it's from the 1990s. Michael insists, Brittany replied with obvious irritation. He still has this misguided sense of obligation to her. But honestly, I don't know how much longer I can stand having her around. She's going to be our problem for years. His father died at 60, but both his grandmothers lived into their 90s. We could be stuck with her for another 20 years. 20 years of her showing up to holidays, expecting to be included, making everything awkward with her poverty and her sad stories. Stuck with. Lauren laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Doesn't she have any money? Can't you just stick her in a cheap nursing home somewhere? One of those Medicaid places. Get her out of your hair? She has a teacher's pension and Social Security. That's barely enough to keep herself fed and housed. Certainly not enough for us to get anything useful out of her. She's basically worthless, financially speaking. There was a pause, and then Brittany said something that made my blood run cold, that changed everything, that would haunt me in nightmares for weeks to come. Sometimes I wish she'd just have an accident, fall down some stairs, get hit by a car, something quick, then at least we'd have the life insurance money. Michael has an old policy from work that lists her as one of the beneficiaries. Some outdated thing he never bothered to change. $500,000, that would solve a lot of our problems. We could finally pay off our debt, take that trip to Europe I've been wanting, maybe even buy a vacation house. They both laughed like it was a joke, like fantasizing about my death was amusing dinner party conversation, like the idea of me lying broken at the bottom of stairs or bleeding on a roadside was entertainment. Then their voices faded as they walked away, leaving me sitting in the bathroom, with my heart pounding so hard I thought I might have an actual heart attack right there, with my hands trembling, with my whole world tilted sideways. I waited 15 minutes to compose myself, sitting on that toilet lid, staring at my reflection in the mirror across from me. I looked old, really old. When had that happened? When had the young woman who married Robert become this elderly stranger with gray hair and wrinkles and age spots? When had I become the kind of person people could wish dead without a second thought? When I came out, I told Michael I wasn't feeling well and needed to go home early. He barely looked up from his phone as he nodded, completely uninterested in whether I was actually sick, whether I needed help, whether I could make it home safely. It was Sophie who immediately jumped up and insisted on driving me home, even though I'd planned to take the bus, even though it would take her away from the family gathering. In the car, Sophie was quiet for a long time, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, her jaw set. Then, as we pulled up to my building, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Grandma, I'm sorry about Mom. She's not very nice to you. She's never been nice to you and I hate it. It's okay, sweetheart. Some people just don't click. No, Grandma, it's not okay. None of it is okay. Sophie was crying harder now. She says terrible things about you when you're not there, about how you're a burden, about how she wishes. She stopped, biting her lip. Wishes what, honey? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. I can't tell you. I shouldn't have said anything. Sophie, I took her hand. Whatever it is, you can tell me. You can always tell me anything. She looked at me with those big brown eyes, so much like Michael's used to be before they became hard and distant. She talks about accidents, about how if something happened to you, they'd get money and wouldn't have to deal with you anymore. I hear her sometimes when I'm supposed to be asleep. Grandma, I think she might actually hurt you. My granddaughter's words confirmed what I'd overheard in the hallway. This wasn't just venting or bitter jokes. Brittany was actively thinking about ways to get rid of me, talking about it openly enough that her teenage daughter had overheard and was frightened enough to warn me. Grandma, please be careful, Sophie whispered, hugging me tight. Please, I love you so much. You're the only person in this family who actually loves me back, who listens to me, who makes me feel like I matter. If something happened to you, she couldn't finish the sentence. Nothing's going to happen to me, I said with more confidence than I felt. I promise. But Sophie, I need you to promise me something too. If you hear anything specific, anything about actual plans, you tell me immediately. Can you do that? She nodded against my shoulder. I went to bed that night, unable to sleep, Brittany's words echoing in my head over and over. Sometimes I wish she'd just have an accident. The life insurance money, 500,000, that would solve a lot of our problems. It was probably just talk. I tried to tell myself, just venting. People said terrible things when they were frustrated, when they'd had too much wine, when they were gossiping with family. It didn't mean anything. Brittany might be cruel, might be cold, might be every bad thing I'd ever thought about her, but she wasn't a murderer, was she? But what if it wasn't just talk? What if she was serious? What if right now she and Michael were sitting in their beautiful house, planning how to kill me and make it look like an accident? At 3 a.m., still wide awake, still haunted by those words, I made a decision. I needed to know. I needed to understand if I was really in danger, or if I was just a paranoid old woman, letting one overheard conversation destroy my peace of mind. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I called my husband's old friend, Frank Weber. Frank lived in my building, just 2 floors up in apartment 4. He was a retired police detective who had worked homicide for 35 years before retiring. He'd been at Robert's funeral, one of the few people who checked on me regularly in the years since. He was in his 70s now, but his mind was still sharp, his instincts still good. Frank, I need to ask you something, I said when he answered, trying to keep my voice steady. And please don't think I'm crazy, or paranoid, or a silly old woman overreacting to nothing. Dorothy, I've known you for 40 years, ever since you and Robert moved into this building. You're one of the most level-headed people I've ever met. If you're calling me asking for help, I know it's serious. What's wrong? I told him everything. The Thanksgiving dinner, the conversation I'd overheard between Brittany and her sister, Sophie's frightened warning. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I worried that Frank thought I was being ridiculous, that I'd embarrassed myself by calling. Dorothy, Frank said finally, his voice serious, his cop voice, the one that meant he was analyzing something carefully. I've been a cop for 35 years. I've investigated more murders than I can count, and I've seen good people do terrible, unthinkable things when they're desperate or greedy or both. Have you noticed anything else unusual? Any other red flags or warning signs? I thought about it, really thought about it, going back through months of interaction. Michael's been asking me about my finances lately, asking if I have any savings, any investments, any assets besides my pension, asking who's listed as my beneficiary if something happens to me, who would get my things, whether I have a... I thought he was just being concerned, making sure I was prepared, but now it sounds like he's taking inventory, Frank finished grimly. Dorothy, I don't want to scare you, but I also don't want to dismiss your concerns as nothing. Too many times in my career, I've investigated deaths that family members saw coming, that they had worried about but dismissed because family wouldn't do that, and then they were dead. Would you be willing to take some precautions? What kind of precautions? Let me come over. We need to talk about this in person. I'm going to bring my laptop and some equipment. Can I come over in an hour? Of course. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for taking me seriously. An hour later, Frank was sitting in my tiny living room, a serious expression on his weathered face, his cop face fully in place. He'd brought his laptop and a small cardboard box that he set carefully on my coffee table. First things first, he said, opening his laptop. Do you have any estate planning documents? Yes. From when Robert died, everything goes to Michael. It's a simple will, nothing complicated. We're changing that today. I'm going to call my lawyer friend Tom Grant. He's semi-retired now, but he still takes cases for friends. He'll come over this afternoon and draw up a new will for you. We'll set up a trust for Sophie. Make sure that if anything happens to you, Michael and Brittany can't touch the money until Sophie turns 25. But Frank, I don't have much money, just my pension, and some small savings. That's not the point. The point is making sure they know definitively that they won't benefit financially from your death. That might be enough to keep you safe. We're also going to set up powers of attorney giving me and Tom control over your medical and financial decisions. If you become incapacitated, that way, if they try to get you declared incompetent or try to take over your affairs, they'll fail. They won't have access to anything. You really think I'm in that much danger? Frank looked at me with sad eyes, eyes that had seen too much death, too much betrayal. I think people who sit around planning out loud about insurance money and convenient accidents are people you need to take very, very serious. I've seen it before, Dorothy, more times than I want to remember. People convince themselves it's just an idea, just a fantasy, just talk, but then the opportunity presents itself, and suddenly the fantasy becomes real and someone ends up dead. I felt cold all over. What else should I do? Frank opened the cardboard box he'd brought. Inside were 4 small devices, each no bigger than a button, sleek and black and professional looking. These are hidden cameras. They're high-end surveillance equipment, the kind police use in undercover operations. Wireless, motion-activated, cloud recording, nearly impossible to spot unless you know exactly what you're looking for and where to look. I want you to plant these in Michael's house. I stared at him, shocked. You want me to spy on my own son? To secretly record him? I want you to gather evidence. Look, Dorothy, right now we have hearsay. You overheard a conversation that could be interpreted different ways. Sophie heard her mother making vague threats that could be written off as dark humor. If we went to the police right now with what we have, they'd take a report and do absolutely nothing. They'd say it's a family dispute, that there's no credible threat, that they can't arrest someone for having a mean conversation at a dinner party. So what do? We get real, documented, undeniable proof of their intentions. If they're just venting, if there's nothing to really worry about, then we'll remove the cameras in a month or two and never speak of this again. But if they're actually planning something, he let the sentence hang in the air between us, heavy with implication. How would I even plant the cameras? Brittany barely lets me touch anything in her house. She hovers over me the entire time I'm there, criticizing everything I do. You'll figure it out. You're smarter than they give you credit for, Dorothy. Much smarter. Christmas is coming up in a few weeks. They'll probably invite you over again. Brittany seems to enjoy making you work at these holiday gatherings. That's your opportunity. I picked up one of the tiny cameras, turning it over in my hands. It was so small, so innocuous looking. I don't know if I can do this, Frank. He's my son, and he might be planning to kill you. Which one matters more, your discomfort at spying, or your survival? When he put it that way, the choice seemed obvious. Later that afternoon, Tom Grant arrived at my apartment. He was a distinguished man in his early 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been Robert's friend and colleague at the insurance company where they'd both worked, and he'd helped us with our wills decades ago. He listened to my story without judgment, without skepticism, taking notes on a yellow legal pad in his neat, precise handwriting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, tapping his pen against his teeth, thoughtfully. Dorothy, he said finally, I'm going to be very frank with you. What you're describing sounds like the beginning stages of what we call predatory family planning. I've seen it before in my practice. Adult children, usually facing financial problems, Start viewing elderly parents as assets rather than people. They calculate what they stand to inherit, what they could gain from a death, and they start making plans. That sounds so cold, so calculated. It is, but that's what financial desperation does to people sometimes. It overrides normal moral considerations. They convince themselves they're owed something, that they deserve the inheritance, that the elderly parent has lived long enough. The fact that your granddaughter has independently expressed concern is very significant. Children often sense danger before adults do. Over the next 2 hours, Tom helped me restructure my entire estate. I signed a new will, leaving everything in an irrevocable trust for Sophie, with Tom and Frank as trustees. 3 weeks later, fear grew a date, March 15th, my birthday. The cameras had been running since Christmas. We didn't watch them at first. We let time do what it always does, make people careless. When Sophie called me crying from a school bathroom, saying she'd heard stairs, medicine, and make it look natural, I called Frank. It's time, I said. We watched the footage. It was all there, Brittany's calm clinical voice sketching out a decline from my medical records, Michael's mouse clicking through accidental false statistics in the elderly, a list on hotel stationery that read TA's stairs. 15th, we looped in Detective Maria Santo. We set up the perimeter. We rehearsed the hand signal. We tested the panic pendant under my blouse, until pressing it felt like muscle memory. On March 15th at noon, I walked into a house staged like a greeting card, streamers, a chocolate cake, happy 71st. Michael carried out 3 glasses of sweet tea with a smile I didn't recognize. Brittany's eyes never left the rim of my glass. I didn't drink. I ate the roast but let the gravy slide off my fork, apologizing about salt like we'd rehearsed. Brittany's jaw tightened. The script wasn't cooperating. When she suggested I just pop upstairs to see the redecorated guest room, I said my legs were tired. Michael stepped between me and the door. Something left his face then. The sun I raised, maybe. Or maybe I was finally seeing who had been there all along. I pressed the pendant. Sirens grew out of the spring air as if a window had learned to sing. Brittany lunged for the living room blinds. Michael asked me, small and hoarse, "What did you do?" The knocking turned to pounding. Uniforms filled the doorway. Frank's coat followed like an old oak tree, entering a room. Maria's voice was careful and iron at once. "Michael Sullivan, Brittany Sullivan, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, elder abuse and fraud." Evidence marched in behind her, an evidence bag with the gravy boat, a second with tea that glowed the wrong color under a field test, a thumb drive of cloud-saved videos, where Brittany said, "Pattern first, accident later," and Michael asked, "When do we start?" There are silences that make people look guilty. There are also recordings. In the hours that followed, paperwork replaced adrenaline. I gave a statement. Frank put a jacket over my shoulders. Tom arrived with a calm that made rooms feel less sharp. I cried for the first time when they read Michael his rights. I didn't cry for Brittany. The trial took months because justice walks, not runs. The judge allowed the footage. The cameras were mine. The fear was reasonable. The rooms were common areas. A toxicology report made the "it was just talk" defense sound like a bad joke told too late. A handwriting expert traced forged confusion notes back to Brittany's careful script. Sophie testified quietly about the nights she'd heard the word accident through a wall and pretended to sleep. The jury took 4 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge turned their own words into weights. "You called her a bird. Today the law calls you what you chose to become. 18 years each, different facilities, no contact with me or with Sophie, without a court order." Brittany stared at me like I'd rewritten her life by telling the truth. Michael cried. I did. Grief and relief are strange cousins. They arrived together and sat on either side of me in that wooden bench, and I let them. Sophie moved in with me before summer. We learned the choreography of small apartments and large feelings. She checked locks for a while. I announced myself on stair landings. Therapy turned our nightmares into stories we could close. Frank brought over groceries and terrible jokes. Tom brought bylaws and better coffee. We stopped surviving and started living again. Quietly, then loud. A year later, we registered a non-profit, Dorothy's Voice, free clinics for seniors on wills, POAs and scams, a hotline that never asks, "Are you sure?" before it asks, "Are you safe?" I told our story at a city council meeting, and watched a room full of strangers realize that monsters sometimes wear wedding bands,
and carry casserole dishes. Michael writes to me from prison. Remorse tumbles over rationalizations, like an apology trying on disguises. I don't write back. Loving the child he was does not require entertaining the man he became. Boundaries are not bitterness, they're a kind of seatbelt. On my 73rd birthday, Sophie lit the candles and said, "Make a wish, Mom." I didn't need one. The wish had already happened. We were here whole and ordinary and alive. We ate cake with too much frosting. Frank complained and took a second slice. People ask if I regret it. I regret that anyone ever had to teach me the difference between love and surrender. I regret that a mother can do everything right and still lose a son to the quiet greed that grows in the dark. But I don't regret installing cameras. I don't regret pressing a button. I don't regret choosing myself. Survival isn't selfish, it's sacred. I installed hidden cameras because my daughter-in-law treated me like I was disposable. What I recorded proved I wasn't. I'm still here, so is Sophie. So is the garden out back, the hotline at midnight, the old woman clutching my hand after a workshop and whispering, "I thought it was just me." It never was. If this story reached you, tell me where you're listening from. I want to map how far the truth can travel, and if it helped, tap the like button so the next person who needs it can find it. I'll be here with more stories, more tools, and one unwavering promise: I refuse to be silent where someone else might learn to be safe.